It's great to hear from industry experts, but occasionally we need to look at things through a different lens. Use a different focus, if you will. For this reason, we typically invite an individual not from EMS or public safety to provide an opening keynote. So in continuing with this model, we have an extraordinary individual who has excelled in a multitude of ventures outside our industry. He's an accomplished inventor, entrepreneur, and successful author of multiple books, including Let Them See You Sweat. So please give a warm Pinnacle welcome to Michael Levin.
Thank you, Anthony. Good evening. You have seen the TV show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Yeah, a few hands and some laughs. I've got a math question for you based on that show. And apparently my wife and I are not smarter than fifth graders because neither one of us got this right. When I put this next slide up, I'm going to give you about 15 seconds. If you think you know the answer, please raise your hand. What is the number of the parking spot covered up by the car? I'll give you about 15 seconds. If you think you know, please raise your hand. Seen a couple hands. All right, I think that was the first hand. What's the number? And how did you get that? Wow, I'm impressed on 2 counts on that. Yes, you need to look at that upside down, that it's not really a math question. It goes 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, and 91. The reason I did this is not to test your math skills, but in my talk tonight, I'm going to start with change and move to stress and bring them all back together. The things I'm going to talk about are not complex. It came up at lunch today that so often you come, you hear great things, and it's difficult to take things back. I want to make sure what I share are things that are easy for you to understand, because I don't think when it comes to change, when it comes to stress, that it needs to be complicated. But it's counterintuitive. It's not how we normally look at things. It's not how we normally do things. And what I'd encourage you is if you see something and say, I do that, the other thing that happens too is, especially I know we've got a lot of veterans in the room, we see what we're used to seeing. Outstanding on the car being backed into the spot. No one had ever noticed that. I've shown this slide in workshops and keynotes for years, and it wasn't until a year ago that my videographer commented and said, there are 2 anomalies with this slide to make it deceptive. One is, just what you pointed out, that car is backed into the parking spot to make it a little deceptive. Does anyone see the other one? Look at the 16 or the 91. Yeah, you saw it, didn't you? Yeah, it's upside down. The 1 is upside down. Because we see what we expect to see. Last week I was in Kansas City for a keynote, and like I got to do yesterday to hear Brian Bruce's and Jay's talk on mentorship, I got to hear some of the other presentations. And one thing I heard, it was so smart. They were talking about when you're sending out a document that you put together. And they said, make sure, if it's important, share it with others. Let them proofread it too, because our minds autocorrect. We see what we expect to see. And when you've been in an environment for so long, we can see what we expect to see. And a lot of times it takes fresh eyes, fresh faces to give us a new perspective. So in starting with change, how many of you have seen the Kubler-Ross change curve before? Not seeing a lot of hands on this one. Please take a look at this and notice the 7 stages or steps that Kubler-Ross believes occur within change. And I'm curious for you, because the first time I saw this, it reminded me of the 7 stages or steps of something else besides change. If it reminds you of something besides change, please raise your hand. Yes? Thank you, the 7 stages of grief. Exactly. So apparently, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross feels that change ties back to grief. And there may be a reason for that too. She wrote the book On Death and Dying. And in that book, she initially talked about her 5 stages of grief. She later amended it to 7. But clearly, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross thinks that going through change is like going through a grieving process. Well, that sucks. Who is signing up for that? Do you have anyone in your organization who is saying, can we please change something? I haven't grieved in at least a month. No one is doing that. I also don't believe change has to feel that way. I'm going to take you later in my talk through my 3 stages. Because what I want to create is not only an environment where people embrace change, I want everyone in an organization leading and driving change. What I want to share with you is a little bit about my leadership philosophy because it's going to tie back to what I believe with change. I believe in creating entrepreneurial workplaces. I want everyone in my organization to take ownership for their piece of the business and to all those they impact, both internal and external to your organization. What we do is we flip an organization from a traditional top-down autocratic company to one that's entrepreneurial. What happens, for example, in the workshops is all the participants form cross-functional teams to work on key initiatives and problems and challenges. The senior leaders, instead of being up front giving marching orders, they now become the audience. And they operate under 4 pillars. They provide guidance, mentorship, sponsorship, and support to those teams. Their goal is to help those teams be successful because those teams are going to be the ones who come up with the action plans. They're going to be the ones who execute those action plans because I want everyone in an organization affecting change. And when you do that, it's really cool what happens. I want to share just a quick story. Had a business in the automotive industry many years ago. And I want people who have an entrepreneurial bent as part of my team, whether it's a collar team like this one or not. We made used cars look like new. When I was interviewing people, I told them all, we have invested pretty heavily in this business. We don't have a single customer yet. What I can promise you is if you want to work for us and we select you, you got a job for 2 weeks. Don't know what's going to happen after that. We hired 8 people, and in 2 weeks we had over 30 dealerships signed up. And then we gave them a choice, that chance to take ownership. We told them, all of you got full-time jobs right now, and we want to give you a choice. There aren't any spare people in this room. We're just kicking things off. If you want full-time work, that's not a problem. Understand, though, if you miss a day, you're going to need to make it back up because there's nobody in the room to cover for you. Secondly, when you have vacations scheduled, you need to help take care of each other and cover for each other. Or what we can do is give everybody 32 hours, we bring up backup people in here, and your vacations and missed days are covered. Which do you want? Wanted them to own that decision. To a person, they said, we want full-time, we'll cover for ourselves. The side benefit of that is we had no absenteeism, maybe 1 or 2 days a year. And as we got a lot bigger, had backup, when someone missed a day, well, they owned their piece of the business, and they didn't want anyone else coming in and mucking it up. So they would always cover for themselves. So when you create ownership, it provides huge benefits. The other thing, too, when you're creating entrepreneurism, you may think, well, people are going to leave all the time. What we found, though, is those people who initially joined with us, those people who joined us in that first year, the vast majority were still with us 6 years later when we sold our company. What I want to share with you first is my number 1 key that if you want to create powerful, positive change, the key that you need to do that is so often missed. Several years ago, I was asked to speak before a California government organization. The theme for their conference was embracing change. I only knew them from the outside, and I had a feeling that our definition of change might be just a little bit different. I asked them, what does embracing change mean to you? They said, we have all of these new initiatives for our front line, and we need them to embrace that change. I told them, good luck with that. I don't know how you get people to embrace change, shoving it down their throats. That what I really need to do is teach your leaders how to lead change differently if you want me to be your speaker. And we mutually agreed I was not the right fit for them. Because to me, the number 1 key, you got to give people a voice. This goes back to the parking lot. The opportunities. In my workshops, I'll ask managers in there, how many of you give your people a voice? And the hands will fly up. people may feel just a little bit different. Let me share a story about how often our people can feel like they have a voice. In my workshops and working on the initiatives, if someone's impacted, they should have a voice. A very common initiative is to put together career or development plans for all the people, including the front line. I asked the initiative team to run focus groups with the front line to get their feedback. And we're going to run those focus groups during the workshop. I love what happened. This company had about 500 people. And I asked, how many people do you think you can pull? The senior managers in that workshop said, we are so busy, I hear that I think we can only pull about 5 people. And they were legitimately busy, and what they did was critical. They serviced medical devices used in surgery that were life-saving medical devices. The leaders, or should be the frontline supervisors and leads, said, I think we can pull about 20 and be okay, which they did. They go out to the focus groups, and I bring everybody back in afterwards. And I asked the focus group participants, what was that experience like for you? One woman said something that was both profound and sad at the same time. She said, this is the first time we have been asked our opinion on anything. Not just here, but anywhere else we've worked as well. First time we've been asked our opinion on anything, not just here, but anywhere else we have worked as well. I asked the other 19, how do you feel about that? Do you agree with them? To a person, they did. That's how often our people can feel like they actually have a voice. But giving them a voice isn't necessarily easy. There are challenges with it, and I learned the hard way. I don't have time for those stories tonight. So let me share with you, when giving them a voice, I would set the stage for feedback. In an entrepreneurial workplace, there will be typically 3 stages that they will go through. One is, no one ever listens to me. I have told my manager about that problem so many times, and nothing ever changes. Stage 2 is, you're listening to me, and then they expect you to fix it for them. Stage 3 is when they know they're being heard, and you give them a chance to fix it themselves. But here's the challenge, is if they speak up, there's going to be an expectation that you need to do 100% of what they suggested, or they're going to feel like they did this. Let me share how you get past that. With folks and participants, I asked them, how many of them were here? They said about 20. I asked them, how many possible different opinions could there have been? And they acknowledged, could have been 20. I asked them, what's likely that everything you suggested then is going to be adopted? And they said it's not. Then we talked about what they really owe for having the courage to speak up. And to me, it's mainly 2 things. One is a big thank you. A thank you for having the courage to speak their mind. Because there's such a good chance that whatever they said probably was counter to what their manager believes, possibly counter to what senior leadership believes, but they had the courage to speak up, to know that they could face some sort of retribution for what they said. So regardless of whether you use it or not, they need to be thanked. Secondly, you owe them feedback. What did you do with what they suggested and why? I got the focus group participants in that initiative people around me in a semicircle. And I told the focus group participants, this is going to be about a 6-month project. How often would you like to be updated? And they said, once a month would be great. I asked them, how would you like those updates? In writing, in person, both. They said, in writing is fine, both even better. Asking the initiative team, what do you want them doing? They said, we will do both. Then I offered them the chance to have a greater voice. I told those focus group participants, if you would like to be on this initiative team, if you'd like to be on any of the other initiative teams, you just need to ask your manager and they will make the time for you. But first of all, it's never pursuing my bounds. I don't work there. I have no idea. And they're so busy. How can they constantly have time to do this? How can they constantly have time to work on those initiatives? Well, several did volunteer. And what happened was they were key contributors to those initiatives, as well as helping not find who some of their future leaders were going to be. What about the time piece? In the next workshop, I asked the leads and supervisors who pulled the 20, because if people were out for about an hour, how many came to them asking for overtime to make up for when they were in those focus groups? You can probably guess what the answer was. It was 0. It's amazing what people will do when they're motivated. They feel like they have a voice. Before I get into my 3 stages of change, I need to share a story with you about how I learned about this and how I learned that typically as leaders, as managers, we do change backwards. And it's why change doesn't stick. It's why change becomes the flavor of the month. My corporate career was at Pepsi, and ran divisions for them. I'd just been promoted to a district manager position. One of the divisions I oversaw was full service vending. What that is if you've got a soda machine, a snack machine in your organization, and the vending company fills it for you, that's full service vending. When I took this over, I was given what I thought was a pretty daunting task. The average route driver was filling about 50 cases per day on their routes. And they had a goal for me in 6 months, not to increase it by 5% or 10% or 20%, but 160% to 130 cases a day. I thought, how am I going to do this? And as I looked at it, started analyzing the problem, I thought, I can fix this. It's what we do as leaders, right? We fix things, we solve problems, we fix things fast, move on to the next problem. But the problem is that frequently, fixing isn't the first step, it's the last one. And by doing it first, we do change backwards. Let me share with you the solution I came up with. Those machines on average hold about 18 cases. Our average route person was doing 20 stops a day. Got a math question. They're doing 20 stops a day, filling 50 cases. How many cases are they doing per stop? Well, 2.5. You don't need to be a Pepsi district manager to know filling 2.5 cases in an 18-case machine is not very efficient. So what am I going to do? I'm going to reroute their routes. I'm going to change their frequencies. Because now, instead of 20 stops a day, if they just did 16 stops, but only went there 1/3 as frequently and do 8 cases instead of 2.5, I'm up to 128. I got my number. I'm going to reroute their routes. I got this. This is all mine. So I rerouted the routes. And I gave them their new routes. And I said, go forth and conquer. How many cases do you think they came back with? 50 or 60. What am I doing every morning? Telling them, go forth and conquer. Follow your new routes. And they keep coming back with 50 or 60 cases. Finally, one of the senior drivers had the courage to say something to me, and at least I was smart enough to realize I shouldn't get mad at him. He was giving me a gift. He said, Mike, we hear you every single morning. We're just choosing not to listen. I said, okay. I want to know. Let's go grab a cup of coffee. I want to hear what's on your mind. And the important thing here is, it's not a cup of coffee in my office. It's not in the conference room. We went out for a cup of coffee. And I said, okay, tell me what's going on. Tell me what's on your mind. Tell me what's causing you not to listen. He said, well, this is not nearly as simple as you are making it. He said, first of all, for us, if we follow these routes, we're going to have out of stocks. And that out of stock may have been Diet Dr. Pepper, but that was somebody's favorite flavor. And we're going to get yelled at. We'd rather get yelled at once a day by you than 16 times a day by them. Secondly, for this to work, we can't run out of Pepsi. We can't run out of Diet Pepsi, which means we may need to put an extra column in and pull that Diet Dr. Pepper out. Those are not fun conversations for us to have with our customers, and we could use some help. Along with that, those flavor changes, those label changes, they take time, and we don't have time for that. We need someone to support us. Lastly, what's in it for us? We're paid hourly. If we do 130 cases, Pepsi makes a lot more money. We don't. And you may think 4 stops less a day, well, that's easier. But it's a lot more physically demanding on us to do 130 cases instead of 50. The problem was I had done change backwards, and I will share the outcome of this after I take you through my 3 stages of change. The first is communicate with all those impacted. Give everybody a voice. If they are impacted internally and ideally even externally, they should have a voice.
What I like to do here personally is just whiteboard ideas. Comes back to that trite saying, no idea is a bad one. It really isn't. You just want to get ideas on the board. Give everybody a chance to speak up, to share their thoughts. Because what I personally find is those closest to a situation really know best how to fix things. So I want to give everyone a chance to speak up. Stage 2 is the change of culture. Change of culture and move away from a traditional top-down autocratic system to one of inclusion, to one of ownership, where everyone feels like part of the decision and solution-making process, to get everybody involved. And so much of this, in the workshop yesterday, culture came up quite a bit. And so much of culture is the actions. It's not the words. It's what you do as a company. So frequently we think of culture as the mission statement, that plaque on the wall. I'm not saying you shouldn't have one, but your actions are going to mean a lot more than that. And with one client I worked with, they had these 4 banners hanging from the ceiling, huge banners in their lobby. On each banner was one word, and those 4 words represented their mission statement. In my workshop, I asked the participants who had, for the most part, been with this company for years, walk by those banners every single morning. I asked them if they could tell me what the 4 words were on those banners. Yeah, you already know the answer. None of them could. It's about your actions. And you think about the culture changes we faced over the last couple of years. Like being on a plane pre-COVID. If you saw someone come on the plane with a mask, you're thinking, God, they may be a leper. I don't want to sit next to them. Now we only want to sit next to people who are wearing masks. And the funniest sign I saw was my bank. Because prior to COVID, you could walk into your bank with a hat on, with sunglasses on. You certainly weren't wearing a mask unless you had ulterior motives. Now the sign of my bank said, remove your hat, remove your sunglasses, but you better be wearing a mask before you can come in here. It's amazing how the cultures have changed. And then lastly, we need to fix things, to change the process. This is the last step, not the first. And here's the benefit of this. I know you've seen this over the last few years with decisions. That when decisions are being top down, we need to fix things first. How do our people feel about that? I had someone ask me recently in the keynote, who said, I'm talking about these new changes, and the people get mad at me for it. Well, yeah, because you made the decisions for them. You never gave them a voice. And as leaders, if we make a decision, what don't we ever want to be? Sorry. Think back to the days of candidates, not the price around it. We don't ever want to be wrong. And what do we do when we see our decisions going sideways? Do we admit our mistakes? Or do we double down on it? Invest more because we can't be wrong. We just got to make some adjustments. When you do change this way, the upside is, as you're brainstorming, what you may want to do is parallel paths. You may have 2 or 3 different routes you can take. And you can test them all out. When the decisions are made collectively as a group, and no one owns that decision individually, you're attached to it. You just want the best decision. You just want the best solutions. So as you test them out, you can see what's working, what's not working, and make adjustments. I had the honor of going to the CEO luncheon today, and conversation came around change and how do you get people involved in change. And a big part of it is when we feel like we've got to do it all ourselves, when we've got to create the change in a very challenging environment that we have. It can be difficult. You get everyone collectively involved, it becomes so much more powerful. And then when you think about attracting talent, retaining the younger generation. In the talk on mentorship yesterday, Bruce had a comment, Bruce, I hope I get this right into your quote, which was, young people want to make a difference. They want people working to make a difference. I think that's dead on. That when you give them a chance, and clearly what they're doing is meaningful. And if you give them a chance to make a meaningful change to your business, to make a difference, to be involved in decisions, not only will they appreciate it, it's a great way to retain them. They will stick around when they feel like they've got a chance to have some ownership.
ownership. The next thing is those changes don't have to be huge. They can be small ones. Anthony and Jay were incredibly kind and generous with their time to help me prepare for the night. Spent a lot of time with me. One of the stories they shared was about an EMT who was covered in 4 cavities and didn't even have time for a bathroom break. And this person even gets the opportunity to, through brainstorming, through looking at changes to make things better, gets one bathroom break in the ship. That'll make a big difference for them. Because the people who get most excited about powerful positive change are the people on your front line. Sometimes organizations will have you bring my workshops down to the front line, and they get so excited about little changes. I can't even get my stuff done before they pull me out to the floor to show me a small engineering change on a piece of equipment. Or that they reorganize things in their shop a little differently and what difference it made for them. Because the impact we have on people is so profound, and I want to share a story when I was one of your patients. And this story will also tie to the second half when I talk about stress. This goes back about 17, 18 years ago now. I was at a buddy's house and we had a small gathering. And it was a warm day in California. And I was dressed inappropriately for the day, a little too warm. But I felt like being inside. My buddy's kids wanted to play basketball, so we go outside and play basketball. And after a while, I noticed I'm getting pretty hot. And I stopped. Trying to cool down, and that wasn't working. My girlfriend at the time asked me, "Are you okay?" I said, "Hell no." And all of a sudden, I knew I was in trouble. I said, "Please call for help." Right after that, I stopped breathing. And it wasn't like I was gasping for breath. I just wasn't breathing. I left my body shut down. They were bringing me out to the front yard, and I'm pretty sure as I'm passing out, I could hear the sirens. When I wake up, there's an EMT over there. And I'm starting to sit up, and he goes, "I don't think you want to do that. Your blood pressure's 81/50. That's not going to work well for you." There are a couple things I remember about this experience. First of all, the women there, they thought he was so hot. I first didn't notice that. My mind was on something different. What I remember, though, is how he took care of me, how he made me feel, how he made me feel like I was the only patient he had that night, and that I was the most important thing to him. He said, "We're going to go take a little ride together. You aren't okay. Come with me." And I remember how calm he was and how he made me feel. And I still remember it vividly to this day. My guess is wherever that EMT is today, if I were to run into him, he would never remember me. He probably had 50 other people that night. But I certainly remember him and the impact he had on my life and the impact on so many lives that you have. Giving your people a chance to make a difference, to make changes, to have a say, to make things better for all of you can be so critical. And not only helping others, but helping themselves as well, too. Which will lead you into stress.
I was fortunate to write a #1 bestseller on stress and didn't expect that when I did this. The title of the book, Let Them See You Sweat, you may think that when it comes to stress, what I believe is let people see you sweat. Take on stress head on. Be willing to, for example, stand in front of 500 or 700 of you and face the #1 fear according to the book of List, public speaking. It's not that at all. It's actually much more literal than that. One of the effects of stress that I experienced, whether wholly or partially, is my body actually stopped sweating, and I had to learn how to get it started again. And when we think of what we've been through and the impact over the last few years between COVID, between the industry challenges that you face, we even noticed that our pet reacted to it, our toy poodle Riley. Riley started smoking carrots. In fact, Riley started smoking so many carrots, we had to send her to a doggy rehab clinic. Got her down to a 2-carrot-a-day habit. It's affected all of us. And what I want to share with you now are some of the lessons that I have learned the hard way in the hopes of helping others, and things that are certainly going to relate back to today. Number one is to understand the delayed effects of stress. I always thought of stress as real time. I'm stressed out. I'm gonna have a heart attack, I'm stressed out. My time of stress was the recession. We had sold our auto business, done quite well. And after that, for me, things went sideways. I started a consulting practice. Guess what business you don't want to start in the middle of a recession? Yeah, no one's hiring consultants. I had a number of real estate investments that I thought were good ones. I invested in a Baymont Suites right at the doors of Disney World. They went bankrupt. Invested in lakefront property in Texas, and the lake dried up, and that went bankrupt. My financial planner, I mean, I haven't heard this happen, but he pulled this off. He literally managed to lose everything I had in the market overnight. And I was stressing. And then things turned around. I got involved in a health and wellness business. Things were going well. And then all of a sudden I started suffering these physical symptoms. I started having brain fog, shortness of breath, chest pains. My thyroid went out of whack. My cholesterol went out of whack. I developed food allergies for the first time. So my time of stress had passed. I thought, what's going on with me? So I started seeing specialist after specialist. Started with the endocrinologist for my thyroid. And I thought, maybe this can help me, because by this time, I shared with you my first heat stroke bout. I'd had 2 more by then. Wasn't smart enough to figure out to avoid that after the first time. And was having trouble and very sensitive with heat. So I thought, maybe this will help. She gave me a pill. My thyroid numbers became normal. And I didn't feel any better. I asked her, where do we go from here? She said, if your numbers are normal, that's all I can do for you. For the chest pains, I saw the cardiologist. Put me on a heart monitor for 30 days. I pressed the button every time I felt the chest pain. At the end of the 30 days, well, good news is you've got a slight arrhythmia, no big deal, I have one myself. But your cholesterol's out of whack and we really should put you on a pill. I said, let me wait for a little while. I want to see if I can solve this naturally. Next stop was a neurologist, because I'd had a friend die a few years earlier from a brain tumor, and I wanted to make sure whatever was going on in my head, because that brain fog had gone on for almost a year. About halfway through the year, there was this moment of clarity and the fog cleared. And I thought, cool, I'm normal again. And 15 minutes later, the fog came back. And the only question was, how foggy a day was it going to be? I think he was the first to suspect stress, but he never brought it up. Because he said, I don't think you have a tumor, but we'll check it out. Came through clear. He said, but your cholesterol's out of whack. You really should get on a pill, so I did. Finally, after all these trips, my business partner, it is ironic, we had a health and wellness company. She was a former nurse. She said, come check this out. On her computer was a page about panic attacks. And you could have put my picture right there, including the last thing on that list, which was, feels like and may be life-threatening, which I really thought it was and believe that it was. So I wanted to find out, is this really stress? Went to the GP. You know what he did? Gave me a pill. Tried some clonazepam, I felt better. I knew I didn't want to stay on that forever. Because what I didn't understand were the delayed effects of stress. And I think this is going to be so prevalent as we start to normalize to some extent post-COVID, is that we've been through so much. Each of you individually, your teams, the patients you work with, that our bodies get us through that tough time. Whether it's adrenaline, cortisol, it takes care of us. But after that passed, I kept pushing. I did not want to go back to that place again. I never took care of my body when it took care of me. And finally, my body said, it's our turn. And if you don't take care of us, we're going to keep sending you messages until you get it. And sometimes those messages can be too severe. I think what we want to pay attention to is when we're feeling physical symptoms, when our people are, when their patients are, to know that it may not just be physical, and that frequently it's not going to get brought up. Because why don't we talk about stress? We can feel weak, embarrassed. So stress often isn't addressed. My solution wasn't coming from a pill. Now I want to be careful about this one, because clearly I'm on a lot of pills now. But I think what can easily happen, I know it can be challenging for you in your industry, that with the amount of stress you face, the things you see on a daily basis that others like me never see, that it can be easy to take care of yourself by self-medicating, whatever that may be, whether it's tobacco, drugs, alcohol, whatever it may be. I'm not saying don't have a cocktail, but it can be really easy to do instead of doing the things we need to do to take care of ourselves. And my body sent me a strong message about that my solution wasn't coming from a pill. I mentioned about the sweating issue. And I had been seeing doctors trying to find a solution because by this stage I had stopped sweating. So first of all, I'm sensitive to heat, I'm not sweating, my body's a microwave, and they kept coming up with the same solution. Stay out of the sun and drink plenty of water. Kind of figured that one out on my own. Finally got a chance to go to the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale. Any of you been there? It is cool. It's like going to a resort. It's beautiful. They got piano players, games, great food. You want to hang out down there. I meet with the neurologist, and he had me do a blood workup before I came. And I told him, I think I have anhydrosis, this condition that is when you stop sweating. And he said to me, well, I'm the doctor, why don't you let me do the diagnosing? He looked at my markers and he said, you do have the markers for anhydrosis. And I'm somewhat of an expert on this. I did a thesis on this in medical school. And there are a couple pills that I believe can help you. While you're here, I want to put you through a battery of tests, have you come back in about 2 weeks, and then we'll put together a plan for you. I thought, cool. Go back home after the battery of tests. The day before I'm supposed to go back, it's a warm day. My car had been outside. I was dressed in business clothes. I reached into my car to grab something, and my body started sweating profusely, enough so that I had to go inside and change my shirt. I was pretty sure I knew what the message was. The next day, when I went back to the Mayo Clinic, those markers were going to be gone, and he couldn't help me. I also had no delusions that my problem was solved. I thought, this is a lesson that this is going to come from hard work. See, what had happened was I had started dealing with stress at this stage, and I had assumed that this sweating was strictly a physical issue. Well, as I started working on things like changing my sleeping habits, changing my eating habits, and I didn't eat badly, but there was room for improvement. I exercised pretty regularly, but I could do better, and I could change my exercise habits, which I did. I started practicing Qigong, and if you aren't familiar with that, it's a Chinese form of movements that is designed to provide both medicinal and meditational benefits. And I started seeing a counselor. One thing that started to happen is I started to sweat just a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. When I went to the Mayo Clinic the next day and the neurologist walked in, he was almost depressed. He said, your markers are gone and I can't help you. I told him what happened the day before and this journey I had been on. I thought he would minimize it, but to his credit, he did not. He said, stick with it. I believe in what you're doing, and I'm here to help you in any way I can. The next day, I go to the gym, and I had a rough day. I barely sweat at all. Had to smile again because I knew I'd gotten the message. I'd gotten it correctly. This was going to be a journey. My solution was not coming from one of those pills. And it was a multi-year journey. And I can tell you today that while I don't sweat like I once did, I sweat fairly normally. Enough so that I had to start wearing deodorant again. But I think a lot of times we want to take the shortcuts, the easy ways to address stress. It's not saying that pills can't help as part of the solution. I just don't think they should be the only solution. And that leads me to my next one. To let your friends, family, coworkers support you. To take care of each other. To create an environment of openness. And as usual, I learned this one the hard way too. I was on a singles cruise with a buddy of mine, and we were up in the bar. It was really warm up there. I'd had my one heat incident so far. Went up to get something to drink, and I felt the symptoms come on. I knew what it was this time. I looked back at my buddy. He's having a great time. I don't want to bother him. I got this covered. I can take care of this myself. I'm just going to run down to the room, jump in a cold shower, and I'm going to be just fine. I'll be back up. Ran down to the room, got in the cold shower, and I was not getting better. And all of a sudden, I had a medical emergency. And he had no idea where I was. This was well before cell phones. Ended up in their infirmary with an IV in my arm. When he caught up to me, needless to say, he was not happy. And he said to me, when you do something like this, when you don't let your friends support you, when you don't let me support you, you minimize our friendship, you minimize me. Don't do that again. And he was right. And I got a chance to talk with Jim yesterday, who did that workshop on mental health and suicide. And it was interesting because I saw in his deck my personal philosophy around things. That when things are tough, I know you're going to relate to this, suck it up. I was always going to suck it up. I didn't need anybody's help. I could get through it myself. I was going to be just fine. In fact, the next day, everyone was going out to this water park. I wanted to go. And my buddy said, you really should stay in the room. I said, no, I'm going. Halfway to this ferry we needed to take to the water park, my body said, no, you're going to go rest. And I was mad that I couldn't suck it up and push through it. And what I have come to learn over time is that sucking it up has its place. It's just not every place. And I did have to learn that the hard way. When I finally figured out this was stress, one of the things I chose to do, because up until then I had hit it. And when I'd be in meetings with our team, with the brain fog, I couldn't remember what I said, what I did. I'd ask my partner after the meeting, how did I do? And she said, no one would know. When we confirmed it was stress, I said, I need to tell everybody. Because how many of you have read the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team? Anybody? Yeah, I see some hands going up. See some smiles in the front. One of those 5 dysfunctions they talk about with a team is you need to create vulnerability. That we think of vulnerability as a weakness, and it shouldn't be. It should be a strength. It should be something that's respected. Because especially as leaders, if you want your people to be vulnerable, if you want them to be open, if you want them to admit their foibles, you've got to be vulnerable yourself. And if we aren't, we're going to keep it in. I knew it was not going to be healthy for me to keep it in, so I talked with my team. I shared with them what I was going through. And their response to a person is, we've got your back. We've got you covered. And they did. A few months later, a reaction to that was a combination of both physical and stress left me bedridden for about 3 months. And they said, don't worry, we've got your back. We will be better than ever, which they were. To be able to let that go, to be able to bring this together as a team. When you think about the stressful situations you're going through with your businesses, with the challenges, and I can relate. I've got a business right now where we import. I understand supply chain challenges, the challenge with cost, inflation. So I understand some of what you're dealing with, and you have a lot more cost restrictions or price restrictions than I do. When you try and do it all yourself, when you take on all that stress yourself, this is going to go back to the piece on change. It's difficult on everybody, and your people will feel it. I think Brian brought it up in the mentorship talk yesterday. He said he was buddies with the old CEO of Best Buy, and he said when that guy did a talk, if he was in a bad mood, if he wasn't in his best place, the stock went down. And your people will be the same way, that they can feel your stress, they can feel your challenges. Get them involved. And you may be thinking, well, I don't want to stress them out. Especially if you got younger people too. They want to make a difference. Make this a community. Get everybody involved. Give them a chance to have a say. Share the problems to where you can come together and create solutions together. For our business, it was a village. We brought everybody together, everybody on our team, all of our suppliers, and we brainstormed and collaborated. How do we get through this together? And it's allowed us to solve the problems. Next thing on my list for you is about self-maintenance. Jane and Anthony challenged me. They said, we need something that will stick. And people will talk about it the rest of this week. I hope I did this. Because I thought about those 2 words a lot. And why is that self-care? And we need to take care of ourselves for us to be able to take care of others. How many of you flew out here? Vast majority. I know you don't pay attention to the safety breathing, but you're still going to know this. What do they tell you when the oxygen masks come down if you have a child with you? Put your mask on first. You got to take care of yourself to be able to take care of others. When you think about what you do, I am guessing that the vast majority of you have maintenance programs for your vehicles, for your equipment, because you got to make sure they're up and running properly. But to our people, our most important asset, have a self-maintenance program. Are they doing things to take care of themselves to where those changes aren't made afterwards? Came up in the election today where eventually we burn our people out. How can we help them get on a self-maintenance program when that doesn't happen? Where ideally they are physically and mentally able to stick around longer by that program. I think it's something we have to make sure we do for ourselves. It's something we have to encourage our people to do and to make it part of the regime. Because to do so, I think it's critical for everybody's success. When I wrote my book, I was inspired by some things that had happened, some people I did with that. I want to share my favorite story with you. I was coming back with guys baseball weekend, and a friend of mine, Chris, was sitting next to me. Chris was telling me about how despondent he and his wife were. They badly wanted their own children, and had not been able to do so. They were the oldest of 3 each, and their 2 younger siblings, all their kids. Now, they were open to adopting, they would also want their own. But they said, we've gone through all the possible medical protocols. And the doctors have told us we will never have children. Not that we might not that we probably won't, we will never have children. I asked Chris, as you run very physical, you consider the emotional side, that perhaps the stress behind this has blocked things that could happen naturally. So I'm guessing many of you have seen this, know about this, focus on the president's experience, where they were trying so hard to have kids, and eventually when they stopped worrying about it, just let whatever happened, all of a sudden, became pregnant. Let me tell you their story. This is a miracle. See if you can figure this one out. Chris and Erica today have 2 beautiful girls. They are both around. Neither was adopted, and they were born 1 month apart. Let me give that to you one more time. 2 little girls, both around, neither adopted, born 1 month apart. They're adopted. What happens is, when they decide to be open that baby stress is causing us, let's relax, let's just have fun around this, let's let this go. Erica had a conversation with her sister, and she said, would you want me to potentially try to carry your baby? Let's see what happens. They said, yeah, let's give this a shot. They were open anyway. So they give this a shot, and Erica's sister gets pregnant. 1 month later, Erica gets pregnant herself. And both sisters are carrying their children at the same time. I want to introduce you to the Coronado family. This is Chris, Erica, Jasmine, and Valedia. I've had many conversations with Chris and Erica about this, and they say the same thing, which is, without that plane flight, without that conversation Chris and I had, these 2 beautiful girls would not be here today. Because so often we ignore stress as a possibility. Before I close and bring this together, as a thank you for being here, if you would like complimentary e-versions of any of my books, I don't charge for my books. I wrote a book on my collaborative selling philosophy called Sitting on the Same Side of the Table. There are communication things in there that I think you may appreciate. My book on stress, and I had the pleasure of collaborating with Jack Canfield. If you don't know who he is, he was the co-creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul, and many others on the book called Road to Success, and in that book I write about my leadership philosophy. If you are interested in those, if you want the slides, just reach out to Juliana at michaeljlevin.com and she will get you taken care of. In the interest of taking care of our people, Juliana texted me yesterday. She has COVID and she has brain fog. So when you do write her, please know she will definitely get back with you, but she will wait till the brain fog passes, because we want to make sure she gets a chance to take care of herself. If you want to chat about anything, 2 different ways, please just reach out to her. She has access to my calendar. She will book something. Afterwards, to be next door in the Fitch booth, please stop by and say hi as well. Tying this all together, though, between change and stress. The change is stressful. It can be. And I think we need to acknowledge that as well, too.
Several years ago, I had an engagement over in Ireland. And afterwards, I was touring around. I met a doctor named Miles Ken, and he was there for a conference on artificial intelligence. And he said to me, this is really cool, because even as an experienced doctor, I may have 100 data points to make a diagnosis. But with AI, I can have a million. But for us doctors, it's going to be tough, even though it's going to be better. Because we're used to playing God. This is our call. And now we're giving that diagnosis over to the machine. For our patients, it's going to be tough for them because they're used to what hopefully is a good bedside management. And as medical professionals, probably know what's wrong with them. Now it's being given over to the machine. So while this is better, it's not harmful for either. He said he walked into a doctor's office, a friend of his, and he got a stethoscope around his neck. And he said, what are you doing with that? I haven't used one of those in years. And he says, because it makes my patients feel comfortable. There's a line in the song already blonde by the Eagles that I really like that ties back to this. And so oftentimes it happens that we live our lives in chains. And we never even know we have a key. And it's up to us to unlock our own chains, that as leaders frequently to lock control. And to relinquish control to our people, to let them make decisions, to let them make changes. It can be hard for us. But we've got to relinquish that control and unlock our own chains. And we need to unlock our people's chains so they understand what a difference they can make. Not only for their patients, but for themselves, for their lives. To create the type of life they want, both professionally and personally for themselves. For me personally, change of business, easy. I've had my own businesses for the last 35 years. Easy for me to do. Personally, a little more stabilizing. At the tender young age, I probably should say, of 58, I got married for the first time, 4 years ago. This is my wife, Joanne, and Marty, my wife. At our wedding, I gave a toast, and I said, I know my friends are here for 2 reasons.
First of all, I am so fortunate to have the best friends in the world. And secondly, if you weren't here to personally witness this, you'd never believe I've actually gotten married. I want to thank you so much. You've been a great audience. Thanks for having me.